Hello, and welcome to the ninth episode of Tech in Chicago. I'm Colin Keeley, and I interview Chicago's top founders and investors on this show. Today, I'm excited to welcome Jacob Babcock to the podcast. He's co-founder and CEO of NuCurrent, a wireless power company that has designed the world's fastest, smallest, and most efficient wireless power antennas. For anyone that has wondered why we still have to deal with all these charging cables, this is the podcast for you. We talk about how he made the transition from law school to founding a very technical startup, what the future with wireless power will look like, and how they're able to steal business away from many multi-billion-dollar companies. All right, enough of me. Here's Jacob. We have Jacob of NuCurrent today. Jacob, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
So people that maybe haven't heard of NuCurrent yet, can you explain it a little bit?
Yeah, NuCurrent, we're a wireless power company. Wireless power is changing the way people interact with electronic devices, from mobile phones to vehicles to computers and virtually everything in between. Our customers like Apple and Samsung and Ford, they come to us because we make wireless power antennas that are thinner, lower heat, and higher efficiency than anyone else's. So what we're trying to enable is a world where people don't have to plug in anymore. So if you're driving down the road, you can put your phone in your center console, it's charging. You're traveling, put it in the rental car, it's charging. Stop at a Starbucks, you can charge. Go to a hotel, it's charging. You don't have to carry your cords around anymore. And we really like to eliminate that drawer that everyone has in their house with about 50 old cords that you might someday use, but no one ever does. We're ready to get rid of that drawer.
For me, it's in my kitchen. My whole desktop's just completely covered in cords. So how'd you guys get started on this idea?
This is, it started a few years ago when I was in law school at Northwestern. I took a class called NuVention Medical Innovations. So we really started focusing on solutions to medical device problems in neurosurgery, specifically spinal cord stimulation devices. The pulse generator that is implanted is connected to the electrodes, which is implanted in the spinal column by a cord. And that cord failed 40% of the time after 3 months of being implanted in the human. So that's a huge problem. It costs about $25,000, not to mention the agony of having to go to multiple surgeries. So that's what we were trying to fix by getting rid of the wire with wireless charging. We were in heavy R&D mode for about 3 years, and early 2013 is really when we pivoted to focus more on popular consumer devices, and we've been at it since then. So we've had two big phases of the company: our R&D phase, where we were really developing the fundamental technology, and then now our commercialization phase, which is what we're in right now, and the market's just booming, and we're kind of lucky to be in the right place at the right time.
So NuCurrent is a very technical company. How did you make the jump from law student to the founder of an engineering-driven company?
You surround yourself with good people, I think, is the best way I can say it. My partner, Vineet Singh, he's our CTO. He joined up with me right away, right after school. He's a PhD electrical engineer. He's taught me a lot along the way, and then you just try to absorb things. And so for me, it was sometimes a very fast learning curve, sometimes very slow. I think at this point, I do know a lot about wireless charging and kind of the physics that are very closely revolved around wireless charging. But if you ask me some other basic electrical engineering 101 question, I may not really know the answer to that, because if it doesn't have to do with wireless power, I don't have the background to know it.
What was the process like in making that initial prototype? Were you guys making this in your parents' garage? Have you come by any funding?
A garage may have been nicer, actually. We were in a shared space in Evanston where it's about the size of the office we're sitting in right now, which I think is like 15 by 10. We had 4 different companies sharing this one office, no windows. And the first prototypes, I mean, were very crude, very rough. Vineet had an idea on what might solve this inherent problem in wireless charging, which is inefficient components. And so we had these inefficient antennas, and he thought of a way to make them more efficient. And he was just building these things by hand, literally cutting copper foil and then stacking them by hand just to see how it would work. Really grotesque looking prototypes. And then over time, we just started refining them into the beautiful, physical, producible, mass producible products that you could find today.
And how did you guys decide to go the B2B route instead of maybe like making an adapter for an iPhone or something like that?
It was never really a decision that we sat down and considered. I think that because we are a component and subsystems company, we could have gone the consumer route. And every once in a while, we'll dabble around with, do we want to, hire a company to build a sleeve that we can put out in Kickstarter using our technology? But at the end of the day, we're always a company that's providing the fundamental technology that goes into systems, whether it's a sleeve for OtterBox or whether it's a sleeve for Kickstarter or whether it's an Apple phone or a Dell computer. That's where we're better than anyone in the world with our technology. That's where our intellectual property resides. And so I think it's just a natural fit. It was never really a conscious decision. It's just clearly our customers need to be the companies that put out the devices because that's where we have our specific strength.
How did you guys make your first sale or find your first partnership?
Through need of the customer. So our customer was building wireless power systems, and they were using a reference design from a very large company, multi-billion dollar company. But our customer ran into a situation where it worked really well in the bench, so in their lab setting, but they weren't building it to a point where it could be mass producible. And it would have trouble passing FCC regulations and CE regulations in Europe. And so they realized that one of the problems they had was the consistency of their product. And they knew that they'd heard about us and heard that we might have this more consistent process for building these antennas. And so they asked us to see if we could solve their problem. And we did. And then that kind of started the path of us replacing these big multi-billion dollar company products using our product because they're superior. And it was based out of a company that had a very significant need to improve their own device in order to bring it to market.
So I'd like to dive into the technology a little bit more. How does electricity get sent through the air? Like, how is that possible?
Sure. So this is using magnetic fields. And so using magnetic fields, you have your transmitter that transmits a magnetic field to the receiver across an air gap. And so you have this AC, alternating current going from one side to the next side, and that AC is harnessed on the receive side, converted back into DC, direct current, and that's supplied into the battery, or in some cases it could be directly powering a device like medical snippers or something like that. This is something that Nikola Tesla really proved actually in Chicago at the World's Fair in the Columbian Exposition. So I think that was 1893, world's first demo of wireless power. And what he did at that time was he powered a light bulb. I don't know how, maybe a 50-watt light bulb. I don't know what light bulbs were rated at then. He powered a light bulb from one side of the room to the next without any wires, just using two big antennas that were the size of hula hoops. So that was 1893. And then in the 2000s, mid 2000s, there started to be a lot of kind of resurgence and reexamination of Tesla's experiments for wireless power transfer, because we're all becoming consumed and addicted to our personal computing devices, whether it's a phone, your Bluetooth headset, your tablets, your wearables now. And then the whole focus now has been miniaturization and increasing the efficiency. It's still fundamentally the same magnetic principles that Tesla knew about at the turn of the century. But now it's about commercializing it and making it efficient so that it fits into these devices well, and so that it doesn't create too much heating or too much problems for the devices.
Are there any limitations on it? Like, what's the range? Is there a big loss of efficiency as opposed to corded?
Yeah, so this type of wireless charging is specifically known as near field magnetic charging. It is limited by distance. So typically for near field magnetic charging, you will need to set your device, let's say a phone, you'll need to set your device either directly on a transmitting pad or using some of the systems that we've helped our customers build. There's systems where you can embed a transmitter underneath a tabletop or like a granite surface or a wood surface. And then if you set your phone on that surface, it will charge, but it doesn't charge in your pocket. So this is kind of it's a plus and a minus. The plus is because it's near field magnetic coupling and you need to have this close proximity, usually within about 5 centimeters transmitter to receiver. It is in some ways limited so that you can't, just beam power around a factory and turn on all the machines and all the sensors from one source. It's limited in that way. But the positive side is it's inherently safe. The fields don't travel very far, so it's not damaging to people. It's not dangerous to animals and other, living organisms nearby. These are near field. They're small distances, and so it's an inherently safe and efficient system relative to some other types of technologies that are just starting to surface and being researched for long distance, far field technologies that tend to be very inefficient and at this point also unsafe.
Can it scale up to, say, like charging a Tesla car?
The fundamental technology, yes, it can. NuCurrent doesn't work on that, but there are other companies that do work on that. And I think that's one of the coolest use cases for wireless charging in its early stages. I think electric vehicles are awesome. However, from my days working in medical devices, I also know that asking people to change their behaviors is one of the hardest things you can do. And when I drive a car and I come home and I put it in the garage, I walk out of the car and go into the house. I'm not used to having to plug it in. And that's a significant behavior change for people with electric vehicles. So the fact that people can, in a year or two, drive their Tesla into their garage and then walk out and go into their house and not have to think about plugging it in because they have a transmitter in the floor of their garage and a receiver in their vehicle, I think that's a phenomenal use case. NuCurrent doesn't do it because we have so many opportunities at the lower power levels. So, 10 watt receivers for phones, for example, that we don't really focus on the 5 kilowatt and 10 kilowatt systems. The physics is the same, but the electronics is completely different. And our electronics are more well suited for the lower power.
Let's talk about that. What kind of products are you guys in today?
So today we're in either pre-market or on-the-market devices would include mobile phones, wearables, automotive, medical device. Basically, if you think about products that have lithium-ion batteries or rechargeable batteries in them, there's potentially a strong use case for wireless charging. So for phones, the benefit is really it's a lot about convenience at this stage, and it's a sexy feature for phone companies to put in. I don't think anyone is really struggling that mightily with having to plug in their phone. But when you start using wireless charging, like you can see I do on my desk here, it becomes nice that you can just set your phone down. You can see your text messages coming in, pick it up, put it down. When I leave the office every day, I'm at 100% full, and that's nice. But for other devices like medical devices, for example, wireless charging provides the benefit of being easier to sterilize because you don't have these electrical contacts exposed. So now you can hermetically seal the devices, and now it's very easy to clean them in between surgeries. There's durability benefits because one of the most common causes of failures, I don't know if you've had this problem, but I did have this problem where my iPhone stopped working. I couldn't charge it anymore. It wasn't consistent. I would plug it in and sometimes it would charge, sometimes it wouldn't. I didn't know what was going on. At the end of the day, it ended up being pocket lint buildup in the plug, which is very common for them, but that's a big reason people visit the Apple stores. So if you get rid of these connectors, you can start making devices waterproof. You can start making them more durable, eliminate failures. And so there's a lot of benefits.
Interesting. That actually happened to my first iPhone. I didn't make that connection. I should try to fix it. It's sitting in my drawer.
I know that was embarrassing to me. I at that time we were probably 3 years into NuCurrent, and I couldn't believe that I had to go in the Apple store for them to take out a Q-tip and pull out the lint. And since then it's happened again, and I knew what to do. I took a tweezers and pulled it out.
So what's Apple's deal? Why isn't this everywhere yet?
So specifically regarding Apple, Apple's a company that does not adopt technology quickly. I think their motto is not as much about going fast. Their motto is about getting it right from their perspective. So just look at like NFC or mobile payments, for example. I I don't have the specifics, but I believe that NFC has been in most Android phones for at least 2, probably 3 years at this point. It was just the Apple iPhone 6 that first introduced the ability to use NFC payments, which they call Apple Pay. That was the first time 3 years later, probably maybe more. They they are less interested, in my opinion, in just being early adopters of the technology. They want to make sure that the ecosystem's there. So they wanted to work with Whole Foods and they wanted to work with Bank of America and make sure that all the terminals are ready for them before they put it in their device. Now, when it comes to wireless charging, there's multiple different types of technology for wireless charging. I alluded to this earlier. There's pad-based charging, where you'll have a transmitting pad that you can put your phone on. It's nice, but it's also another accessory. So you need to have a transmitter in order to do this. But the future generation of wireless charging, which might be what Apple's waiting for, is where your laptop can charge your phone just by sitting next to each other, or your tablet can charge your wearable. So you're basically using the larger battery from one product to charge the smaller battery of another product. And so there's this whole ecosystem of interconnected devices that are all charging each other. Right now, cars do charge phones wirelessly. So there's about 20 different makes of cars in 2015 that were shipped with wireless chargers in them, from Cadillacs to Toyotas to, I believe, BMWs, for example. And that's just like the first glimpse of what I believe Apple's going to help bring into the world, which is this really diverse ecosystem of products that can all share power with each other. So if your laptop's full and your phone's not, you can borrow 10% battery from your laptop in order to gain 50% battery in your phone.
So every battery would be attached to a two-way sender receiver for the battery and electricity. Is that what you mean?
That might be one way for it to work, yeah. So there does need to be a transmitter if it's going to transmit. There does need to be a receiver it's going to receive. They might be discrete, 2 separate components. They might be the same component. But yeah, it's something that's definitely being explored, kind of in the deep, dark, hidden labs of offices like this one. And other technology leaders. It's not in any products today, but it's where the future of wireless charging is going. And since Apple's not usually an early tech adopter, I can certainly see where they're waiting for that before they really go full into wireless charging. That being said, finally, regarding Apple, they actually do use wireless charging in their watches. For wearables, wireless charging is a no-brainer. Wearables, one, have to look beautiful because it's jewelry. 2, or as beautiful as possible. 2 is they're very small. And so to put a traditional connector like a lightning connector or a USB micro on there, there's really not a lot of room for those type of things. And so while Apple hasn't put wireless charging into any of their phones or tablets or computers yet, they do use it in their wearable device.
Okay. So that magnetic component
Correct.
on the back.
They, instead of using conductive power transfer, they're using magnetic inductive power transfer.
Let's talk about your company a little bit. How many employees do you guys have now?
Right now we have 12 employees, and we're going to be doubling our headcount this year, and we're also opening an Asia office this year. A lot of our customers and contract manufacturers are based in Asia, so we're doing global growth, but also local growth as well.
It's super technical. Are you able to find everyone you need in Chicago?
Yeah, Chicago's it's a very interesting place for a hardware startup company. There's a ton of talent here. If you look at our big company pedigree, Motorola, their company is struggling right now with, they've gone through multiple acquisitions. They split up their company. But certainly 10 years ago, as recently as 5 years ago, this was one of the preeminent engineering organizations in the world, widely respected for the caliber of engineering they do and the products they put out. So we have this wealth of Motorola employees. Right now on our team, 3 of our 10 people at one point in their career have worked for Motorola. And then you have other companies that might not be as well known to the general audience, like Molex. They were acquired for $7 billion 2 years ago by the Koch brothers. You have Shure, Knowles, and a variety, Zebra Technology. So you have a lot of hardware technology companies here in Chicago that are big. What you don't have is a lot of hardware technology companies that are startups. So on the one hand, it's great because we're one of the only fish in the pond. If you're at a big company and you're a talented engineer and you just want to break out and have some more control over your destiny, we're one of the only places you can go and stay local in Chicago. On the other hand, I think it is advantageous in ecosystems where there are a variety of startup companies, because it is hard at NuCurrent. It's hard to find people that are 10-year experience vets, and 5 of those years include working at startups, and they really understand the culture. So for us, we can absolutely find talented engineers, no question. The challenge for us is usually finding the people that have the right perspective and the right characteristics to thrive in a startup environment, which is clearly very different than multi-billion-dollar organizations.
How do you test for that in an interview?
You try to use the character questions. You try to introduce them to people on the team and get feedback from other people on the team. At the end of the day, I think one of the big differences between startup organizations and large organizations is in large organizations, there's a lot more long-term strategic planning that's pushed from the top down through the ranks. And so it's like a ladder effect. You kind of pay attention to 1 or 2 steps above you on the ladder and you do the right thing. So there's there's the executives at the top that are pulling all of this innovation and product guidance through. Now here we have long-term strategic direction too, but rather than a ladder, I think about this more as like a human chain of people all holding hands and charging forward together. And so when you don't have people above you to like pull you forward, but you have people next to you that all want to succeed together, and you're running forward together. And so I think it's very important when you're interviewing people from large companies to see if they're going to be a cultural fit for startups is, one, to make sure they fit with your team because they're going to be spending long hours and late nights and weekends and doing travel with the team, and they need to make sure that it's someone you want to hold hands with next to you and run forward with. And 2, they have to be they have to have a characteristic of being enterprising. So that's a word that Vineet, our CTO, likes to use, but they can't be someone that solves problems when there's obvious answers. They need to be very resourceful and enterprising to solve problems that no one else has solved answers to. That's what makes NuCurrent different than our competitors. We solve the problems other companies can't. We see the toughest challenges from Apple and Samsung. If it's easy, Apple will do it themselves. And they have great engineers. So we're expected to deliver results that Apple's own engineers can't deliver, which means we need people that are enterprising and can find solutions that most people can't find in an uncommon way. So I think as long as they're a cultural fit with your team and they're ready to put in those extra hours that it takes, and then they're enterprising, then they can be a good fit.
So how are you able to see that someone's enterprising? How are you able to pick that out early on?
Yeah.
Before you actually have them in for a month at a time or whatever?
Yeah. So I'm not too schooled in like interviewing theory, but I think that's more of like the behavioral interview approach, where you like to see, you like to ask them about examples from what they've actually done in the past. I don't tend to dwell, and my team doesn't tend to dwell on what do they want to do in a hypothetical sense here at NuCurrent. Everyone can say, I also say that I'm going to start working out 7 days a week and, eat better. And, everyone can be aspirational and know what the right things to do. But let's look at the history. Like I'm lucky if I work out twice a week, and limit myself to a burrito, on the weekends and not also during the week. So I take the same approach to hiring, where you really need to know what people's actual activities are. So what challenges have they faced in the past? What has caused them to spend extra time at work solving a problem? I'm sure they've done it, but is it because their boss needed them to? Is it because they were passionate and they just had to solve the problem for their own peace of mind? Is it because there were deadlines and they were part of a team that they had to hit and they didn't want to let anyone down? Or is it because they wasted too much time early in the program and then they had to catch up? So they're asking about what they've done in their past and really not listening to the answers as much as listening to the context behind the answers is how I try to find out if they are enterprising and if they're the type of person that can solve the problems we need them to solve.
Okay. At my last company, we would always use the threat of the reference check. So you'd ask what what their old boss would say, and then we'd follow up with like, obviously we're gonna follow up with him and call him, and so you got to be honest here.
We actually do that as well. So we do I do a 30-minute screening interview with every candidate, and I'm usually the first interview at the company. So it's for two purposes. One, for recruiting, I want to make sure that I'm putting the right foot forward, representing the company, because it's hard for interviewees to know what NuCurrent is. Is this a legit company? It's small? I see they've raised some money, but it's unknown relative to going to Siemens or Apple or Google or whatever. So I like to do the first interviews, but then also during those interviews, yes, I say, tell me the names and the spelling of your last three bosses and what they would rate you on a scale of 1 to 10. What are they going to tell me they love about you, and what are they going to tell me that they wanted you to improve?
Let's talk about your funding a little bit. How much money have you guys raised so far?
Yeah, so total we've raised about $4.5 million. Okay. Yeah, and we're in the late stages of closing another round.
And that will be what, your Series B?
Yeah, this will be a Series B.
What are some of your favorite books and why?
When you say books plural, I do kind of like the things that are kind of easy to read, but also some historical things, so I can learn at the same time that I read some interesting stories. But as far as books that have any kind of nuance for business, there's two that I like, and they're both survival stories. So I really like the book Endurance. It's about a British voyage in the early 1900s across Antarctica. This was kind of the last frontier for exploration. And the captain of the ship has to make some very significant decisions throughout the book continuously. And he has to keep his crew alive and also motivated to work with each other through very dire circumstances when they lose their ship and they're in Antarctica and they know it's the wrong time of the year. No one's going to be able to come and save them for a long time. So it's a very interesting book. It's certainly one of my favorites that I'd recommend for anyone that either likes survival stories or I really do think there's a lot of business lessons there in leadership. And then the other one, again, love survival stories. I like the book Alive about I need to watch the movie too. I haven't seen it, but the book Alive about the Uruguayan rugby team that their plane went down in the Andes Mountains, and people remember them because they had to eat the bodies of the dead people. Very interesting book. Again, survival I think is important. Understanding how people lead under that kind of pressure, which is not the kind of pressure we face, obviously, very different. But it's those type of books are very interesting to me and also can be inspiring.
So if you could go back and talk to yourself day one when you were starting the company, what advice would you give to yourself? What would you have done differently?
Looking back on what we've done, there's certainly been a circuitous path on where we started and where we are. And it is hard to know earlier on what you need. But one of the things we've really benefited a lot from recently is hiring very experienced employees. And I would like to go back and tell myself to hire these experienced people earlier if they would have come at those earlier stages. But for example, we hired an electronics industry veteran. His name is Michael. He's our VP of Business Development. He was a director of strategy for Freescale, which was a spin out from Motorola. So he helped take them public. And then he helped take them private again when they got bought by a private equity fund for, I think, $19 billion. It was the largest technology transaction in that sector in history. So he had been a business development person, a marketing person, a salesperson in strategy in this industry. And here I am. I hadn't been in this industry before. Vineet hadn't been in this industry before. And so by bringing him on, he has been able to give us a perspective on challenges to come that we don't yet realize, help us understand the right way to scale, help us understand the right times to say no to customers, when to turn down great opportunities, when not to just push because you're the biggest phone company in the world tells you to. Those type of things are so valuable. So my advice to myself and to any other entrepreneur is to bring in truly experienced people as early as you can, But I also recognize that that's an easier said than done, because I've noticed that as we've grown, as we've achieved more patents, and as we've achieved more customers and more fundraising milestones, now it's easier for us to get like Glenn Reese. He was at Motorola for over 30 years. He was an RF engineering manager responsible for the Motorola Razr phone and the Motorola Droid. We hired Pavel Shostak. He's a 10-year vet with a master's degree from Illinois. He's a 10-year vet from Motorola. He was their subject matter expert in near-field coupling, which is very similar to wireless charging. We hired a PhD from Intel who had been there for 8 years. So being able to hire these people now is excellent. I wish we could have hired him 3 years ago, but I also have to be realistic that at that time, why would someone have left their great steady job at one of those big companies to come work for a company that had, as of 3 years ago, not really proven that much? So there is a give and take. You have to prove enough to hire the experienced people, but my advice is definitely get those real experienced people on as soon as possible. Intelligence and grit and energy are absolutely essential for your founding team and your earliest employees, mostly because you can't hire experienced people typically. So then you have to start supplementing as early as you can, and then maintain that kind of energetic approach and entrepreneurial approach, and hopefully let that rub off on your more senior people. And then you have a really dangerous and positive mix and a talented team.
That's fantastic advice. Are there any other founders or companies you look up to?
There are from time to time. I don't have like a holy grail person that I just look up to all the time. There's one company that there's a piece of a company that I look up to, which is Intel. And I think they're a phenomenal company. They've had tremendous success with their CEOs. I mean, if you look at the lineage of that company, the CEOs that have come through there have been some of the most successful CEOs at building and growing companies of any large companies. They've had very few failures there. But what I really like about Intel is now known as the chip inside of the computers, and it's a differentiating factor. So that whole Intel inside and the little jingle that you hear in your head when I say it, they invented that concept. Before, it was just a little black box that goes into people's computing devices, and who cares? No one even thinks about it. They're B2B. We don't know who they are. So in some ways, since NuCurrent is a company that sells a superior and differentiated electronic technology to businesses, we can either be that company that you'll never know about, but you're using our devices, or we can be that company that shows that that Apple or that Samsung or that Motorola is putting a differentiated, superior product together for you, because this has, it's powered by NuCurrent. That components that are better can get recognition. It's something that Intel did very successfully, and I do look up to them, at least in that respect.
Is that something you guys are working on, getting that sticker on the outside of devices?
Not really. I mean, it's something that is being asked of us in some cases, not usually at the device level, but we do have customers or licensing partners that know that our brand has been established worldwide, and so when we give them permission to use our antenna technology to sell those antennas to their customers, they want our brand to be on that. They want to be associated with using NuCurrent technology. So I'd still say we're kind of one level deeper. It's not the end customers like Dell. Dell's not saying, hey, can we put your logo on our box? But it is the companies that supply Dell. Sometimes we do it directly, but sometimes we do it through partners, and those partners want to use our brand because it is known. It's becoming synonymous with advanced and high quality wireless power.
Okay. And what's the vision for the long term? What's next for NuCurrent?
We're in a period of just rapid growth. The doubling our headcount this year, opening Asia. We have established our technology as the leading technology in the world in our category. It's been proven out by the relationships we have with Broadcom and Texas Instruments, NXP and MediaTek, and the list goes on when it comes to the leading chip companies in wireless power. the customer implementations that we're starting to get inside of with Fortune 100 companies, with global companies. It's just more of that. So we're building out our sales team. Right now, everything I've talked about, we've done without a sales team. It's me and Michael and Vineet. We do the sales. So we're bringing on a sales team. We're opening up an Asia office to improve our manufacturing capabilities and improve our customer capabilities. And really, this is just a period of hyper growth for us, where it's do the same thing we've been doing, but do a lot more of it at the same time.
That sounds great. If people want to learn more about NuCurrent, where should they go?
They should go to www.nucurrent.com, NuCurrent. If they're interested in wireless power and kind of the trends that are there, I try to post about every 4 to 6 weeks. I try to post a little article on LinkedIn as well, so they can check that out. It talks about like the top 5 things you should know about wireless charging, or the unknown benefits of wireless charging. So if they're interested in the technology, I try to cover that as well on my LinkedIn page.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you.
Huge thank you to Jacob for coming on. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please give a quick 5-star review on iTunes and/or Stitcher. We still only have a few reviews, so every review helps a lot. If you guys have any feedback or guests you'd like to hear from on the show, I'm always happy to chat. I've gotten some great recommendations recently, and I'd love to have more. Please reach out at Tech in Chicago on Twitter. Support for Tech in Chicago comes from Geneva Denim. They're a Chicago-based jean company and makers of the world's most comfortable jeans. If you're like me and hate wearing stiff and uncomfortable jeans, you have to get a pair of Geneva Premium Active Denim. Check them out at genevadenim.com. See you next week.